Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Based on a True Story. My name is Matthew Baxter.
Hi, everyone. I'm Karen Stolzno.
Greetings. I am Blake Smith.
And today we are talking about the fantastic movie that some say is a fantastic movie, others don't. Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. So
it is very, very popular. Been around for a while now.
It is. And the book was extraordinarily popular that it's based on.
Yeah. So that was a non-fiction novel. Is what it's called, by John Berendt, and he wrote that, or came out in 1994. It took, I think, 7 years to write the book, which is quite some time for a book. But then the movie was directed by Clint Eastwood, and that came out in 1997. And so, yeah, we'll start talking about that, and then whether this is a true story or not. And I mean, there's a lot to unpack with this movie and with this book as well.
Well, I think on the face of it, a lot of people are going to think, well, this is kind of a, murder mystery courtroom drama kind of movie. What's with this is where's the paranormal? But I think that even in the movie, there were some paranormal things. And from what I've heard, because I don't do much book reading, the book has even more. So
there was a whole bunch of pretty words, but in betwixt those words was lots of supernatural stuff. So yeah.
Yeah.
This
Hoodoo,
is Blake Smith,
voodoo.
our resident scholar. So
and Georgian. I know whereof I speak.
And Georgian.
Yeah, that's going to come into play for this particular episode, I think. But Matt, do you want to give us a kind of breakdown of the plot?
Well, you've got this great group of people that live in this semi-isolated community, and when that happens, people tend to get a little eccentric.
They are very eccentric.
Yeah, there's just a few, because they are in every town in every state and every country. You have a certain number of eccentric people, and some are more colorful than others. And in Savannah, it seems that there's some beautifully colorful ones. And what basically happens is this writer from New York, an author, but he's called down to Savannah to cover a story for, what was it, Home and Field and Stream?
Town and Country. Guns and Ammo.
Right. I couldn't remember.
Well,
Town and Country to cover this annual Christmas party that is said to be quite a blowout. So he comes down to check out the town and talk to everybody that he can to get as much information for this article. Attends the party, and lo and behold, someone is murdered.
It all happens pretty quickly, really.
It does happen very quickly.
You don't get something like that until further into the movie, but yeah, it all happens up front.
Right. Yeah. So the remainder of the movie is basically about the main character.
So John Kelso, played by John Cusack. And Jim Williams. Well, that's the thing. I think they both kind of share top billing for the movie.
Right. So Jim Williams was the person who pulled the trigger multiple times, and the rest of the movie is basically trying to decide, was it self-defense or was it not? And it seems kind of cut
he never
and dried
denies
in various
doing
places.
it.
Yeah.
Right. He definitely pulled the trigger. Right. Yeah.
Right. But the big determination on whether or not it was self-defense is what they really try to hammer out through the rest of the show, along with some interesting sort of interweavings of the supernatural by way of hoodoo. And so we can talk a little bit more about that as we get going. So
yeah. Well, I think we should just mention or refer to the title. So the title alludes to the hoodoo notion of midnight, and that's the period between the time for good magic, which is 11:30 up to midnight, and the time for evil magic, which is apparently midnight through to 12:30 in the morning. And I think it's interesting because the Bonaventure Cemetery just comes into play so much with the imagery of the movie, but it as we can see with Matt's background here, which is nice and appropriate. But
praise the
Blake,
Lord. It's like, what's
yeah.
Give me the strength.
I
Blake,
forgot.
you're going to have
Yes.
to tell us, does this feature as much in the book or more so? Because it's a beautiful cemetery, yet in the movie, or I believe in the book, a lot of this is actually taking place with regards to the magic, the folk magic. It's taking place in a different cemetery, which is actually in South Carolina in Beaufort. So,
yeah, there's two cemeteries at play in the book, and one of the things that's going on is the character is called Billy Hanson in the movie and Danny Hansford in the book, but the guy who gets shot, you know, I don't want to spoil it because there's a whole, the movie has a disturbingly tiny sliver of information about the guy who is dead. And I mean, even if the person who dies is a jerk, I usually want to know more about them if they're the center of a murder trial, or as in the case of this book, 4 murder trials.
Yes.
It's an incredibly complicated legal story, and there's so much compression going on. But to answer your question, Bonaventure does figure very strongly in the book as well as the movie.
Okay.
And
that makes more sense for the cover of the book.
Yeah, and there's a lot, there's some cool, there's some class stuff going on. The guy who dies is basically a very poor, emotionally disturbed
escort.
They call him a gay hustler on, like, he's, you know, on the square, and he's got a girlfriend, and at the same time he's sleeping with men to make money. He's got a he's a really troubled kid. I mean, he's only like 20, 21. Yeah. And but he always talks about Bonaventure Cemetery while he's alive. He's got this death fixation. He doesn't believe life holds anything for him. And he keeps talking about how if you're big, if you're somebody important, they give you a great big tombstone in Bonaventure. And while he's living with Jim Williams and working with Jim Williams, he knows if he dies in Mercer House, he'll get himself a big fancy tombstone, which is ironic because even within the context of the book, he gets a little flat rectangle, which is not at all what he was shooting for, so to speak.
Getting shot.
Interesting. He's so flat and 2-dimensional in the movie. We really don't get to see much of him at all.
At all.
Yeah. Yes, indeed.
I mean, he's as thin as his tombstone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's not a very flattering portrayal. Yeah, so.
The image on the cover of the book is that of a statue of Bird Girl, as she's known, and she's since become so popular.
Not this one. That's not Bird Girl.
No, that's not. I think that was just a better.
She does have wings, but
yeah.
Well, yeah, she's holding the kind of 2 plates the bird feed. It's a little bit like the kind of scales of justice. That's how she looks a little bit too. You get a sense of that. But she's since been taken out of the cemetery because people have just wanted a piece of her. And she's in, what's the name? The Telfair Museum?
Yeah,
Telfair Museum. And it just seemed to me they kept cutting to the image in the movie. And at the end, it came into play, but not for the rest of the movie. And I just thought, they're just kind of capitalizing on the attractive statue, but it doesn't have anything to do with the storyline.
I want to...
She's haunted too.
Of course she is.
Yeah.
I was going to say that the cover of the book was, I think, an important part of why it sold so well. It's kind of a haunting, what's this all about? And even the title itself is very mysterious. You want to know and so about halfway through the book, you find out why it's called this. And in the movie, they sort of had that same kind of scene where it's the, in the book, it's he takes Minerva, who is this hoodoo woman, out to this graveyard to try to do good and to do bad. And I don't want to get all out of whack on our plot. I want to make sure we've covered what the story is, and we kind of have. But let's back up a little before we get into all the supernatural stuff, because there is a whole lot more supernatural in the book than there is in the movie.
Well, I mean, I wanted to ask. So you've got this half an hour before midnight. You got a half an hour after midnight. And each one is for different tasks. If you were to say, be doing your good stuff in the first half hour and maybe ran over by 5 minutes, does that mean that what you're doing is going to turn evil, or if you start too soon, does that mean that your evil plans are going to go good?
What about other time zones too?
Light
Right?
savings. Yeah. What do we got there? I mean, this is really confusing to me. And
I think if you have a doctorate in hoodoo, you get an extra 15 minutes on either side, I think is how that works.
Yeah,
so
we're overthinking it.
So you can decide if you're on bar time or not.
Yeah.
So this is a pet peeve of mine. There are so many places in the paranormal where time is part of a legend, and it doesn't account for daylight savings time. It doesn't account for clock corrections by the this is out in your neck of the woods, the national timekeeper thing where they have the instrument measures office in Denver. Yeah, it is a little, it's weird because, the whole idea of time zones being around the world and all that stuff is relatively new. I mean, that really came along with trains when we suddenly had to really pay attention to traveling fast enough that it mattered. Like, traveling fast enough that when you got to one place, you wanted to adjust your clock and know when noon was and that sort of thing. The world's changed in the past 200 years quite a bit around time. And I don't think the paranormal's caught up with it. So
yeah, I guess it's the novel part of the book.
Yeah,
the fiction part.
Well, and it makes you wonder, because is the brand of hoodoo that was practiced in Savannah different from the brand of hoodoo that you, Blake, practice in Kennesaw?
That Blake personally practices.
Does it change much?
Our school is the Kennesaw State University Owls, so we're the Hootie Hoodoos. For the dozens of Kennesaw fans out there, salute. Yeah.
Well, I guess we should talk specifically about the movie at first anyway, and the way that hoodoo is practiced, because I mean, you have Jim Williams, so he has committed this crime and he's trying to influence the court system through folk magic and folk medicine. And this is a really popular thing with people who believe in this kind of stuff, to burn a candle or to do some kind of spell to have a certain outcome with a court case. So it seems like in the book, he truly was practicing this with Minerva, the root doctor, and in the movie that they are going to the cemetery and trying to, I think, petition Minerva's husband to act on behalf of Jim to have a positive outcome for him in the courts.
That's right. Minerva was in sort of a common law marriage towards the end of her life with a Dr. Buzzard, I believe, who was a local practitioner.
Stephen Robinson was his name, but he was Dr. Buzzard.
She keeps his sunglasses. He has like these purple sunglasses, and they're a prominent thing that she wears. All through the movie, you'll see in the courtroom people finding twigs and dust and all these different things, and they don't really explain it. And all those are, I don't want to say props dismissively, but they're part of the physical manifestation of the hoodoo practices. Like talisman. She's using graveyard dirt. She tells people to do these really bizarre rituals. And I say really bizarre. What I mean is they seem very specific yet trivial. Things like bring me a jar of water that's never flowed through a pipe and it can't have a lid on it. That kind of thing. And so it's like these very specific, bring me a photo of this person and I want you to write, or get a piece of paper and write their name 7 times continuously without lifting the pencil, and all these different, rituals, which if, we've talked before about chaos magic on the show, and this idea of, which is very much like The Secret, and using your focus and will. Now that's in the movie, and in the book, it's even stronger. Jim Williams, and we should say Jim Williams in the book and in the movie is an antiques dealer. He says he's nouveau riche, self-made man. He started out as a kid doing buying antiques and fixing them up and then selling them for more. And that was his whole life. He just continuously tried to find good finds for great prices. He got really into Fabergé. He was one of the world's leading collectors of Fabergé jewelry and the eggs and all that sort of thing. And
they didn't go into that in the movie at all.
No, and he's conducting it like this trial it's 4 trials over 8 years before he ends
Yeah.
up getting released. And it becomes pretty clear early on that basically the crime, like he definitely killed Danny, but it's the question of, or Billy in the movie, he
Yeah.
definitely killed him, but it's the, what was his motive and was it self-defense? He could have probably gotten a manslaughter off real easy if he had just come out and said, you know, a few different things, but because he sort of hid parts of their relationship and other stuff, it really became more of a trial about, oh my gosh, this prominent citizen is a homosexual and we, you know, have to, you know, be, and so it became more like a hate,
he was on trial for that.
He was on trial for being gay, basically, and, which is weird because if it was secret, nobody cared, right? It's because he was prominent and it came out that suddenly he has to be judged because the secret has been made public, right?
Right. And I think that's where the movie seems really dated too, because
it totally does.
This goes back to the 90s, and just even the terminology. I mean, homosexual just it comes across as an insult nowadays.
Yeah.
And
I think it was kind of then too.
And
but you're right. Yeah, it's obvious that they're trying to hide it and all these other things, yet it's a huge part of Savannah. Like it absolutely is a big part. Like when last time, not a couple of times before, I went with my wife to Savannah, and we've just not really thought it through, and we were like, my, it sure is crowded, and it'd be like Gay Pride weekend, and so you know, like we're there, and like, oh my God, these people are having so much fun. Savannah right now is such a gay friendly, you know, place, and it's just, you know, these people are so happy to be at a place where they can be themselves and not have to be judged. And it's like, that's so contrary to the way it's presented in the film and in the book, because things have changed, right? But that whole idea of the confirmed bachelor who likes to collect antiques,
confirmed,
you know, these are these are Southern ways of talking about homosexuality that have been around for, you know, 100 years without really talking it, you know, without explicitly explaining it. You know,
well, I think this is a good place to talk about the author of the book, John Barrett.
Yes.
And you revealed to us that he was gay too. So
my understanding, he doesn't, like, that's not a big prominent thing.
Know that. I mean, they didn't allude to that. It wasn't stated in the movie, so we had no idea. He seemed to have a close relationship with the lady Chablis. Yeah, the trans woman, and so but we didn't know that. So when you mentioned that to us, it was like, oh wow, okay, that actually explains a lot about maybe why he was brought to Savannah specifically to cover the story.
I thought so too. I thought maybe like I've seen it said in multiple places that he's gay himself, but I haven't seen him say it, so I'm not sure. I don't want to accidentally out him if he's not out, but I think he is. But you're right. He comes from New York to Savannah to hang out, and all these people he's hanging out with are all kind of tied up with cultural signifiers that seem like they're gay adjacent, you know.
We should mention too that he has a girlfriend. Well, he meets a woman and has a relationship with her.
There's Mandy Nichols and Joe Odom. They end up open. There's a storyline. There's so much in the book about Joe and Mandy. Yes. But he's also in a relationship. He's got to be bi. I mean, he's in a relationship. Well, I don't know. In real life, definitely gay. In the book, he's having a relationship with Mandy Nichols. Now, they're business partners in real life. I don't know if in the book they were really romantic. He kept making jokes about being my fourth ex-wife and all these other things. I don't know. There's a whole lot of very relaxed sexual attitudes in the privacy of Savannah. So
which is cool. But I think that Mandy has come out since and said that she wasn't in a relationship with him because he was gay. But
that would make the most sense. Yeah.
He was an interesting character too. And in the movie, they portray him as though he's a squatter of a nearby house.
He actually in the book
holds these lavish,
it's so funny. It's
styled parties.
And it's even funnier in the book, which is not surprising. A whole bunch of things would make more sense in the book. Joe Odom is a sort of a disgraced lawyer. He was in a law firm and things didn't work out, but his real passion is two things: He loves to host parties and he loves to play the piano. So he tries to set up himself in a business where he's like playing the piano. He partners with the woman of 6,000 songs who appears in the party scene. And then their relationship kind of fails because Joe, while he's a fun guy, he's not very good with money. He tends to bounce checks a lot. And ultimately, he partners with Mandy because she's got enough business savvy to kind of keep him out of trouble. But they open a bar called Sweet Georgia Brown's, which was quite kind of legendary here for a while, and in Savannah. And
I've heard of it.
So it's a piano bar. It was really cool. Ultimately, it failed, and I think Mandy actually passed away a few years ago herself. I think she had I think she had multiple sclerosis. And so, but there was some cool interviews with her. But yeah, no, their relationship was business. And so I think when they say it's a true story and a novel, like it's both, it's not like in Cold Blood. I don't think that's what it's most commonly related to. I think Truman Capote in Cold Blood, he's telling a true crime story, but he also fictionalizes part of it. It feels like there's more fictionalized in Midnight because he's changing people's genders. He's changing people's sexual orientation. But again, he's probably protecting them because the world now is much more permissive in America around those kind of lifestyles and orientations than it was at the time. So maybe he was just trying to protect people, you know, and I imagine they were all chuckling at the idea of Joe Odom having 4 wives when he was actually homosexual.
Well,
but
I guess
he was an interesting character.
We're veering into the territory now of talking about whether this is a true story or not. But just to follow up from what you were saying, Berendt has commented on this before, and he said that the book is 99% true and 1% exaggeration, and that several changes were made in adapting the film from the book, and that many unused characters were eliminated or combined into remaining ones. And that he also states at the end of the book, all the characters in this book are real, but it bears mentioning that I've used pseudonyms for a number of them in order to protect their privacy. And he did give them all the option to appear in the film if they wanted to. So some of them did and some didn't. And one of them was the Lady Chablis played herself.
Yes. And I don't know how the trans community feels about this book and movie. I thought it was astonishingly progressive for when it was written, because he always the author always talks about Chablis as a woman. He always treats her as a woman, and I think that's very respectful of her view of herself. I don't know.
He's very respectful in the movie too. Really treats her like a lady and buys her flowers and gets frustrated with her at times because she's an exaggerated character.
She's an over the top. She's the kind of person who would use you and you would know you're being used, but it's kind of funny. So it's like, you know, you don't mind it as much because it's going to give you're going to be out $20 in a car drive, but you're going to have a really great story. You know, I feel like that's how it must have been around her back then. Now she ended up becoming quite famous after this book was, released and the movie was released, and she passed away not too long back. And they've got a big plaque up on one of the walls near the square.
We should mention her significance in the movie. Anyway,
which is quite different from the book. Yes, we should go ahead.
Okay, well, because she's just this amazing character, and but I think they kind of pushed it to make it fit for her to really be in the movie.
The first part, but I will say the first half of like the stuff that matches the book very closely is when she shows up in the courtroom. That's just that's not real. So.
Okay.
I look forward to hearing about that.
I was going to say Chablis. The author meets her coming out of a doctor's appointment, and she asks him for a car ride, and it seems very forward, and he doesn't understand that she's trans at that point, but pretty quickly he finds out that she is sort of, I think what we might say pre-surgery. I don't think she ever plans to have surgery, but she's
having hormones, so she's
having hormone therapy.
Medical transition.
Right. She's developed breasts. She's very feminine. And I mean, I think very effectively she comes across as a woman. There's lots of sort of physical characteristics that we think of as male and some we think of as female. She presented as a woman very effectively. But in the movie, they end up taking her all the way into the courtroom and having some purpose for her to be there. This is one of my big beefs with the film is they have all these interesting characters in the book. And that's because this ultimately is two things. It's a character study of the city of Savannah and the many interesting people who live there. And halfway through the book, it turns into a sort of a murder mystery. And so and it's not really too much of a mystery. You know who pulled the trigger. The question is why, and are we going to get an answer to that? And then whether it's right or wrong, we're going to have to find out whether he wins or loses in court. And that's where all this supernatural stuff comes in, because Jim Williams consistently believes that he can use magic in order to change the outcome of his trials. And he also believes that he can use focus and psychic energy to change the outcome of random things. He invents this game.
That's not in the movie.
No, not at all. He invents a game he calls Psycho Dice, and he tries to get people to play with him, where he basically is trying to manipulate dice rolls using the force of his mind. And he keeps talking about Duke University, and what he's talking about is the Rhine Institute, J.B. Rhine, and the idea that you can use your psychic will to manipulate outcomes of otherwise random events. And I as skeptics, we find this is nonsense, but it was something he really believed in. And he also believed in the power of hoodoo to influence outcomes. So he was a pragmatist in the sense that he was constantly saying, I don't know if this is real or not, but why not?
Why not?
But he also
what I've got to lose.
Exactly. He spends thousands and thousands on lawyers, but he keeps saying that the best money he spends is the $25 a week on Minerva, because he thinks
it worked
she's
in
more.
the end. Well,
it did work. So
I have a quick question. Now, just so we have some clarification, I don't know if you want to take this one, Karen. What is the difference between voodoo and hoodoo?
I wasn't sure if we mentioned that or not yet.
We have not. No.
Yeah, it is a little confusing in the film, because I think that they refer to it more as voodoo, or it could be in the book, whereas voodoo is a religion, and hoodoo is more folk magic and folk medicine. So it's not practiced as a religion. Hoodoo is actually is American grown, homegrown, and I think. Like, I'm not sure if you mentioned already, with the low country country hoodoo, that it comes from the Gullah Geechee culture. So those people were the descendants of Western Central African people, but there's no Catholicism woven into it as there would be for voodoo. So this is more about magic, and
it's more practical,
right?
Definitely, as practitioners would see it. And so I do believe it is practiced there. Lots of parallels between Savannah and New Orleans. And I read somewhere a long time ago that Savannah is like New Orleans with a penicillin shot. It's a kind of cleaner version. But I see a lot of similarities with the way that both voodoo and hoodoo are practiced. But I think in Savannah, there's more of a focus on hoodoo. Even though they keep referring to it as voodoo in the book.
Well, I think they called Minerva a root worker.
Yes.
Root doctor, and her husband
I heard
as well.
Root worker, and I was just thinking, in America, root worker would be kind of the hoodoo doctor. In Australia, the root worker would have been Danny/Billy. Is that correct?
I was thinking the same thing. It's solid. Yeah.
I want to add to when Blake was talking about how John Kelso met the Lady Chablis. There was actually a previous meeting in the movie where he went to her house because he was wanting to talk with her about Billy Hanson. He'd actually lived there. And so he was trying to, I think, get some background information on Billy and his personality and what was going on. And that's where I think he found out that he'd had a boyfriend, or had a girlfriend. So that was where they first met, and she was very distraught because the information had just come out about the murder and had not dressed yet or put on her makeup. And so that's why he ends up kind of tracking her down and following her when she went to the doctor and presenting her with some flowers in apology. So I don't know how
she even said, I believe, you're coming up on my doorstep with, not even bringing me flowers.
Yes, that
kind of thing.
Forgot that,
yeah. So that was definitely a fun thing. But I wanted to say about the whole root worker thing, the hoodoo thing, was that I read somewhere, and I think you might have as well, Karen, that some of the actual Western medicine doctors in the area weren't taken seriously unless they knew a certain amount of the root work as well. They needed to kind of be able to speak both languages medically to be taken seriously.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that particular area, but it may well be the case. And I guess it depends too on the community of people that we're talking about.
Right. We've talked about it, or maybe we have, or maybe we haven't. I'm not sure on the show, but like the fact that China, has a tremendous amount of traditional medical practices, and they also have science in regular hospitals, but it's way more economical to just let people rely on folk medicine than it is to try to build a hospital system. So I think there's some sort of salutary neglect. Yeah.
A lot more integrated and complementary there than it is considered to be here.
Yeah. It's fascinating though. Like if I've been to Savannah lots of times, and I don't and haven't been on the lookout for it, but I don't remember seeing many like people with a shingle up saying, root practitioner or traditional folk medicine or anything like that. Yet they typically do exist in the communities. Often it's like somebody in the neighborhood, everybody knows, go see grandma so-and-so and, get those kind of
I would say
treatments.
That again is like Louisiana voodoo. And you have a lot of places in the French Quarter, which are for the tourists, really. And if you are a local or you're in the know, you're going to know who you want to visit for people who practice the real voodoo. And I think just the times that I've been there and I've tried to talk to people about it, they'll always talk about real voodoo as opposed to whatever they give to the tourists, those little voodoo dolls, little sticks with
which literally says made in China on the bottom, right?
Yeah.
Yes,
I'm having flashbacks from when we were there, Karen. And Blake, you were there as well, but Karen and I went on that little romp trying to find a true voodoo practitioner for a voodoo doll, a real voodoo doll. And boy, was that entertaining to, all the whispering in the back of different shops and everything.
Oh, and how dangerous it is too. And do you really want to mess with this kind of thing? And so you've definitely got that.
It's like,
And I think the same thing in Savannah too. You have that tourist face, and you've got stores where you can buy all kinds of paraphernalia, but there's this underground version of real practitioners.
Yeah. But it seems like Williams really believed in Minerva. And then I guess, so over the course of the book, there's the original trial, and then there's an appeal, and then there is another appeal, and then there's another appeal. So there's 4 trials, right? And the original trial seemed like the jury already had him convicted in their heads before they even went back to talk. And then I forget, I should have written this down. The second trial, he was still convicted, but it seemed like it was like maybe more in his favor. And then there were some questions about one of the jurors maybe had called up. I think in the third trial there was a deadlock, and then in the fourth trial he finally got the acquittal. But in the fourth trial they got him moved out of Savannah to Augusta, and then they actually got him acquitted.
I heard that. Yes. Yeah.
So I think there was just too much he was extraordinarily famous, right? Well, he was so famous because he and one of his neighbors had been like key people in the restoration and preservation of the old downtown Savannah homes. A lot of people to just demolish those homes and build up a city, like build up big businesses and whatnot, and hotels, and they found ways to build community groups that could donate money to preserve, and they would do things like buy a house and sell it to someone who promised to restore it properly, that sort of thing. But then you got into big disputes because there was anytime you're able to get grants and other kinds of money, people become suspicious you're trying to just exploit the money and not actually do the development properly. So there's always questions of who are you giving these houses to? There's class issues and race issues and all that sort of thing. Meanwhile, while he's in prison, I was just saying, in prison, he was running his I shouldn't say prison. He was in jail for most of this because he kept being on appeal. So he never had to go to the big prison. So consequently, he had a phone in his cell and he was able to continue to do his business.
So yeah, he never got bail.
He got bailed, but he never got prisoned. So he
did they consider him to be a risk of flight? Maybe that
they let him go to Europe and New York and all this other stuff, and they never thought he was a flight risk. They knew he was going to come
because
back.
in the movie they considered that he is. So he goes, I think, straight to jail. But they hold the trial immediately.
Yeah, in the movie they've really streamlined things. Well, they've got they introduce all these characters in the book. They have no purpose for the trial, and in the movie they've got them all sitting on the jury. Like there's 12 people in Savannah. They're all in the movie and on the trial. They're in the jury. They're
We're going to mention Luther. Matt, do you want to tell us about Luther?
Luther,
and his pets.
Well, I'm sure Blake's going to be able to fill in some blanks on this one.
There's a lot of blanks on this. Yeah,
a lot of blanks here. But this is a very nice gentleman who actually is a good friend of Clint Eastwood's, or the actor is anyway, who had all these large flies with threads glued to them, acting as leashes, basically, and then attached to his clothing. So he was like, it reminded me of Pigpen a little bit from Peanuts, that he had this cloud around him all the time, or just he fell in some, excrement and the flies were just hanging out. But it was a very strange thing. And he also carried around a little vial that was supposedly poison, that if somebody made him mad, he was going to drop it in the town's water supply and kill everybody. And this was one of the upstanding citizens.
He was the head of the
who
jury
becomes the
as
jury
well.
foreman. Yeah,
Jury
exactly.
foreman, yes.
So I wonder if that's true in the book, Blake, and I wonder if that's not a reference to hoodoo in some way as well. This little jar.
No,
of poison.
it's what it is his character. Luther Driggers was a chemist who worked for the government, and he worked with insecticides, and so he knew all kinds of things about chemistry. So he had to do all these experiments on testing these bugs, and like going out to barns and collecting, piles of stuff, and then seeing how many bugs were in it, doing bug surveys, bug inventory, drugging bugs, killing bugs, doing all this stuff with bugs.
How do you get a bug to fill out a survey?
It's tricky. It's like you just dial them up at night, they'll answer the phone.
Yeah.
So but he knew all about poisons and chemistry, and what had happened was there had been a big poison plant during the war for insecticide stuff or something, and he knew where they had buried all this poison, and he went and dug up a bottle and was carrying it around, threatening that if he got mad, he might, poison the water supply. And for almost the whole book, that's part of the story, that people would be like, is Luther eating breakfast? Is Luther, is this one of the days Luther? And he was actually, the book explains everything. He suffered from depression. He had digestion problems, so some days he just couldn't eat. But
another one of these
did
two-dimensional characters in the movie. Then and you just wonder, what's the purpose of this? And
yes, that's why I hate. Let me be spoiler. I hate this movie.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into that shortly. But you're reminding me as well of another character in the movie. Who goes walking and I guess here's another supernatural part, but a ghostly dog,
an invisible
yes.
dog.
Patrick.
And it's very funny in the movie because he's got one of those invisible dog leashes. It's like a joke leash.
Yeah, that kind of holds up. Yeah.
But in the book, book, he just walks. He just goes around for a walk, and it's like a running joke. Everybody knows he's being paid to walk a dog. And the dog's been dead for 20 years, and they're still walking the dog. Yes, I'm still walking the dog, sir. And it's like they're all in on the joke that he's just collecting money from an estate that's been.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, I think the leash in the
leash,
movie is a nice addition because that explains a little more. And
I mean, it tells the story without having to waste time telling the story.
And it's very quirky too.
It is very
what they're
quirky.
trying to get across.
It's good and visual. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Just a guy walking by. You're not going to think anything of it. So.
What about the dog then, the real life bulldog?
Ugga 4 is Sonny Seller, Sonny Sealer, the lawyer is the custodian
Seller,
of
sealer, yeah.
Yeah. He's the custodian of UGA 4, and he had been of UGA 3 as well. And
Williams'
that's
attorney,
that's the University of Georgia's mascot, and they make a big deal out about how much Sonny loves UGA, and so like when he's supposed to be focusing on the case, he's fretting because, oh no, at this point they're going to cause me to miss this game and this game because I'm gonna have to work on Saturday. And he's like, and he's just killing Jim Williams with all these bills, you know, and Jim hates spending the money. And you know, but the thing is, like, they show a picture of him with all these UGA dogs on the wall, and it's like, it might be distinctive for this film, but like in Georgia, I routinely run into business people who decorate their office with all this UGA stuff. It's in no way that's absolutely real. People are that crazy about their dogs and UGA and all that stuff.
Oh, they had people stopping to take photographs with the dog in the movie.
Also totally real. Yeah.
Oh, it's bizarre what's real and what's not in this movie.
Well, you know, here in Denver, for years and years, we had the barrel man that would go to all the Denver Bronco games wearing nothing but a barrel and suspenders to hold it up around him, and you know, had Denver Bronco logo on it. And the barrel man was very kind of famous for that. And we've had a lot of Denver Bronco fans here that would be considered far more eccentric than anything seen in Savannah. So like I said, there are these people in every town. They just haven't done a movie on all these people in other town.
Well,
you know,
let's kind of cut to the chase. Oh,
yeah. Well, I was just gonna say, I got beef. So yeah, let's do a summary and all.
But we do need to talk about how Jim ends up too, because we haven't gone there yet. So but if
spoilers ahead.
Look, let's talk about this. I guess let me read something that I came across. It was an interview that John Berendt did in 2015 about Kevin Spacey and how he performed Jim. Yeah, well, I did think his accent, just watching it at first, I thought he sounded a little kind of slow, and I wondered if it seemed a little bit like some people could see it as a parody of Southerners, especially people from Savannah. And so I did a little bit of digging to look into how people perceived his accent, especially the author. And so he did an interview. John Berendt did an interview in 2015, and he talks about Kevin Spacey and says that he played Williams badly. He didn't even come close. I'd offered Spacey recordings so he could listen to Jim Williams talking to me, regaling me with stories while sitting in his living room in Mercer House. Spacey said he'd already heard Williams on tape talking during one of his trials. But when I saw the movie, I was perplexed by the way Spacey portrayed Williams, because he did it as if he were asleep. He talked as if he were in a fog or sleepwalking. Then I realized what happened, and I thought it was hilariously funny. So Berendt believes that Spacey had listened to tapes of William during the third trial, at a time where he was taking Valium. So he was sounding slower and more sleepy.
Yeah, that would do it.
And so, I don't know if that's true because it's not confirmed by Kevin Spacey. But what do you think of the accent? Because I've spoken to other friends who are Southerners, and they've said it just didn't sound legitimate to them. It didn't sound real. What do you think?
I know people in Georgia, and especially deep South Georgia, down like Columbus area, who do talk that way, but it's kind of a dying way of talking.
Sure. A lot of leveling taking place around the country.
Yeah, well, there is, but up here, we're close enough to Tennessee. You get sort of that Appalachian kind of twang, and so this is like that sort of slow Southern drawl. I get what he was doing. I guess the question is, I don't know that it sounded as inauthentic as a Southern accent or as a Georgia accent, but it obviously didn't sound like Jim Williams sounded, which is a different question.
The point, I guess.
Yeah. So I thought it sounded
two
plausible.
Questions there. Definitely. Yeah. Sure. Do you think in any way that kind of slower way of speaking is associated with someone who's a man of leisure, a wealthy person?
Well, yeah, it's the Southern senator sort of accent, I do
Colonel
declare,
Sanders.
right? Yeah, my esteemed colleague from Virginia should recognize, that kind of thing.
Okay.
I think there is something to that. I mean, Jim
Well,
Williams himself was trying to be something that he knew he wasn't. He was
right.
surrounding himself with luxury and art and fine things and trying to live a fine life, but he also came from a poor background, and he
Just a
really
poor
didn't
boy
like
from
to
a poor family.
he didn't like to part with that cash, and so he was reluctant to spend his hard-earned money. He blew all his money on big parties and stuff that was public facing, but his private life, he said,
He's a
he
miser.
typically kind of a miser, ate it like a motel, a cheap place, just ate
Interesting.
little finger sandwiches and that kind of thing. So he had
Wow.
really great stuff, but didn't want to spend his cash except to raise his sort of cachet, clout, whatever you want to call it, within the
Right.
community. And
Cool.
he was a plotter. He's a schemer. If things didn't work out with his trial, he had this elaborate plan where he was going to turn his fancy house, the Mercer House, into a drug rehabilitation center for African Americans troubled by drug problems, and because it would have ruined like his parent. He really thought that would piss off his neighbors, basically. So he had a plan.
Wow. Well,
so,
now it's a museum owned by his sister.
Yep.
But yeah, Matt, did you want to add anything? Because I
was just going to say, it sounded like, Spacey went to like the Fred Gwynn School of Southern accents for his learning.
Sometimes dad is better.
Well, I've got one quick follow up. I don't think we've mentioned yet that Billy Hanson, and I always confuse Billy and Danny. That was played by Jude Law. I don't think we've mentioned that. What do you think
That's
of
right.
his accent? Do you think that was, because to me that didn't seem very terribly good, and of course Jude Law is British.
He is British. Yeah.
Well,
I thought it sounded phony, but he doesn't get to say. I was still troubled that he doesn't get to say much. All he makes a very poor impression in this film. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
but this is the year he played basically the same kind of character in two different movies as his introductory year of acting. He played
Wild,
Bosie in Wild, as
Stephen
also kind
Fry.
of a gay hustler.
Well, I should, if I can just insert a quick shout out to a friend of mine, Mark Byron Dallas. He's a dialect coach and he is really the best at what he does. So if anyone wants any assistance with accents and dialects, they should go to him, I guess, before listening to an
audio of someone on Valium.
On Valium, yeah.
Well, a friend of ours was saying that Jude Law sounded more like Colonel Sanders than he would have sounded like, someone from Savannah. But
well, as we know from The Walking Dead, there's this big thing where they bring in British people to play Southern Americans. It's so weird. I don't know what that's all about, but every time I talk with a British accent, I get bless his heart sort of equivalents from England,
Oh yeah, yeah.
Right.
Difficult to distinguish if you're not born into that, but
exactly.
I think we should kind of give the biggest spoiler here of the movie and the reality too, and that is that Jim Williams dies. So once he's freed, he becomes a free man. He's acquitted. He dies. He has a heart attack. And I think that this is where in the movie there's some more supernatural, paranormal activity that comes into play when he has the heart attack and collapses on the floor and turns to the side and he sees Billy's ghost there
lying on the floor right where he died,
with blood dripping down his mouth. And yes, exactly. And so I think it just kind of came across as though Billy was coming to claim him, and that comes into play as well with the hoodoo, where Minerva is kind of alluding to the idea that Billy is still out to get Jim, and he's kind of not crossed over to the other side, and he's wanting to seek revenge on him, and kind of comes back for him once he's won the case.
In the book, it's basically the same thing. In the book, he dies behind the desk. So he would have been like in the play. He describes as being in the place where the bullet would have hit him had he not missed, if that really happened, whatever. But Minerva kept saying the same. The boy's still working against you. The boy hates you. He's working against you. Well, and the thing is, it's like Minerva says that it's that the boy wanted Jim Williams to acknowledge him, you know, to love him, you know. And I don't know, but to me, Danny comes across, or Billy, he comes across in real life with whatever the novel is. He comes across as someone who is deeply troubled, has all kinds of anger and rage. His own mother had to put out a restraining order against him. Yeah, she put a restraining order against him, and then she ends up, when he dies, she gives a $10 million wrongful death suit against Jim Williams. It's like, and Jim's like,
really?
You can't even, like, you had to get the police to stop him from hurting you, and now you're trying to get 10 million out of me. And so ultimately,
what happened there, dude?
Well, they couldn't settle that case until they finished with the criminal trial. So when the fourth trial happens and he's finally acquitted, which means double jeopardy laws prevent him from being accused again, then because he was acquitted, his homeowner's insurance took over and settled with her, because it wouldn't settle or do anything until they had the outcome of the criminal trial.
So complicated. Yeah, you can't win.
It is. Yeah, very complicated.
Anything else we should go through, because we should really try to
no we should wind up soon. I think. Yeah. I mean, I think the main thing is the movie is, I hated it when I saw it the first time. And I still don't care for it, but I understand it better now. It originally seemed like a pointless thing with really strange characters in it that made no sense. Now I realize it's a poor adaptation of a much more complicated book. And I say poor, I don't know how they could have done it better, but the book is full of all these character studies. And the biggest character of all is the city of Savannah, which is never explicitly explained in the movie. So it's just like, it's set in Savannah, but you don't see Savannah as a character the way you do in the book, because you got the narrator speaking to you, telling you how this is Savannah, here's how things go, you know. So anyway, I found there was a lot of supernatural stuff, and I think more the movie's interesting. Yeah, more in the book. It's interesting. I don't believe there's much case to be made that the supernatural stuff worked, but it's a hell of an interesting book. It's really interesting. I don't know if I liked it, but it's really interesting. So, yeah.
So what needs to happen is like Netflix needs to do a 6 episode miniseries on it or something to make it to be better. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So certainly the book was extremely popular, as Blake was saying. So 2 years after the book's release, Savannah was seeing a 46% increase in tourism, but the book itself stayed on the New York Times list for bestsellers for 216 weeks. So it was hugely successful.
Amazing.
And I enjoyed the movie. I know Matt did as well, just as a standalone, not having read the book. And you often hear people say the book is better than the movie. That's just commonplace. So I want to get around to reading it someday. It certainly sounds interesting in its own right. But I enjoyed the movie. I think I've been to Savannah a number of times. It's beautiful. Now, we should point people to our episode of Monster Talk Regular podcast about Savannah and Savannah, haunted Savannah, ghosts in Savannah, lots of legends associated with that town. And I think that kind of nicely pairs with this episode.
And I wanted to say, if you like this kind of content, make sure that you like and subscribe, tell your friends, comment below if you've had any experiences in Savannah yourself, and what you thought about the movie itself, and if it comes off as being insulting or if it comes off as being entertaining. For me, it was a good 2 hours of entertainment for me and my whole family.
There you go.
I enjoyed it myself, but it's
but I can see the criticisms.
Things to do when you're dead in Denver. I don't know.
Oh yeah, okay. Crocodile Dundee.
Needed more monsters and not enough stuff blowed up. I needed more explosions. So sorry.
Men It Works Down Under video. How's that for insulting? But I understand
Blake's perspective, but I certainly still enjoyed it. And I think it's an interesting based on a true story, because there is so much truth to it, and yet so much fiction too. It's an
And so
interesting
much hoodoo.
Hoodoo. Who knew?
You do.
But you do so well.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Salute.